Hello everyone. So we're going to go over the last few charts for chapter 19. Again, these charts are on Canvas as usual in the chapter 19 module. If looking at the charts is enough for you to understand how to finish the quizzes, how to do the handout, you don't have to watch this video. But if it's helpful, I'm going to do the video, give a few more examples and so on. All right, so this is a review of what we have talked about already. And this was for cause and effect. So we take two sentences. The weather was hot. We went swimming. That's just a simple expected cause and effect. Hot weather, we go swimming. And we talked about all the ways that we can put these together. So the adverb clauses, because, since are the most common ones. Now that is also a possibility. Because it was hot, comma, we went swimming. If you put it in the front, we have to have the comma. If you move it to the back, we do not want to have the comma. Phrasal prepositions, the grammar follows the adverb clauses, but now we have this because of followed by the noun phrase. Can't have another verb in there. We just want to have a noun phrase in there. Because of the hot weather, comma, we went swimming. Due to is the other one. And of course, if you put it in the back, you do not have a comma. If you put it in the front, you do have the comma. Transitions. It was hot. Stop. Therefore, comma, we went swimming. Or we can move it around a little bit. It was hot. Stop. We, comma, as a result, comma, went swimming. And then we have consequently, we can put at the end. So you have three different positions. Usually it's at the front. That's the most common position. You should do that about 90% of the time. But for variety, sometimes we move it after the subject and before the verb, or at the very end of the entire clause. There's only these three positions. So initial, after the subject, or at the very end of the clause. We always have those commas. Then the conjunctions. The conjunctions of the fanboys, the most common ones are and, A for and, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, S for so, N is for nor, F is for for. They're a little bit less common. For cause and effect, so is the one that we have. It was hot, comma, so we went swimming. And then the last one we did, so that, such that, might be blocked off here with my visuals here, but so goes with an adjective only. It was so hot. But if we put in a noun phrase, weather is the noun phrase, we have to go to such. It was such hot weather that we went swimming. All right. So that is all cause and effect. To finish that handout in the chapter, we need to talk about the other ones. So the next one is showing contrast. That's where we have an unexpected relationship between something, a contrasting relationship between something. I went swimming, it was cold. Usually, if it's cold, we do not go swimming. So this is that unexpected relationship, that contrasting relationship. So we already talked about this for adverb clauses. For an adverb clause, this is an unexpected result. So we don't have because or since. We have the other ones. It was cold, I went swimming. And as you might recall, these are the even though it was cold, I went swimming, that surprise relationship. We have two other ones, although and also though. Even though is by far the most common though. We can change the order as usual. I can take this clause and put it in the back and get the comma out. But we only really use it with the even though. I went swimming even though it was cold. The although, the though, I almost never hear them in the second position. You can. I went swimming although it was cold. That's not bad. But I almost always hear it with the even though. That is by far the most common. All right, so that's one. That's how we join these sentences with an adverb clause. Now let's look into our other options that we have. So again, same sentences. It was cold, I went swimming. This contrast. Adverb clause, we just talked about that one. Now for the conjunctions, for the fanboys, we have two options here. Is the be in the fanboys and the why. I hope you can remember what those are. It was cold. What's the be? But I went swimming anyway. That would be the fanboy. And of course, you could also do it with yet. It was cold, but I went swimming anyway. It was cold, yet I still went swimming. Now notice I added a few extra words here. I don't have to add these words, but they are so commonly used along with but and yet. They just complement that. So it's quite common. It was cold, but I went swimming anyway. It was cold, yet I still went swimming. They have the same function, so they're often there together. Okay, so that's the conjunction. We got the adverb clause now. We got the conjunction. Now for this one, we do have, here I'm just kind of repeating what I showed before for the options. Now we have the transition. Now remember with the transition, you will stop the first sentence, usually. It was cold, stop. And then we have that formal transition word or phrase that we'll put here, usually at the beginning. It was cold, stop. I still went swimming. And I hope that's coming to your mind, but here is the answer. It was cold, stop. However, comma, I still went swimming. So that's the formal transition word, however. That is by far the most common one. We can change the position, of course, after the subject. It was cold, stop, I, comma, however, comma, still went swimming. The end position, it was cold, stop, I still went swimming, comma, however. Now we have two other transition words, less common than however, not as common, but still you'll hear them. They're not bad. Nevertheless is one of them. It was cold, stop. Nevertheless, comma, I went swimming. And here's the last one, nonetheless. It was cold, stop, nonetheless, comma, I went swimming. You'll hear those every now and then. However is by far the most common though. All right, so we've got adverb clauses, we got the conjunctions, we got the transitions. Next we do the hardest one, I think, to remember. That is going to be the phrasal prepositions. So phrasal preposition, remember, for cause and effect, it was because of, due to. Now for the contrast, we have some different ones. And there's the first. I went swimming in spite of the cold weather. That's a nice little clue of the preposition aspect of it. Now notice that the original sentence was, it was cold. I need to change this into a noun phrase. I only want a noun phrase. Now I could say despite of the cold, cold can be a noun, but it's much more natural to put that with weather. So I went swimming in spite of the cold weather. That would be a nice noun phrase. Now we have a nice phrasal preposition. So in spite of, some of you might have heard this before, some of you not. I guarantee you though that now we talk about it, you'll start to hear this a lot more often when you're talking to your roommates and reading in your books and so on. It's not really common, but you will hear it. This will come up. I went swimming in spite of the cold weather. Here's the other one, despite. Now, despite is a preposition. So we need to have a noun phrase after that. I went swimming despite the cold weather. And to kind of help you remind it, they all have this word spite in it. Now, this is the really long form that we have. We have it with in spite and despite. You don't have to use this one. It's not going to be on the test. But remember, we talked about this a little bit for the cause and effect. Because of the fact that, the noun clause. Due to the fact that the weather was cold, we stayed inside. Like that kind of thing. So it's just another option that you have to use the phrasal preposition. Fact is your object of the preposition, and then you add a noun clause here. A little complicated. You don't have to use that one. And here's one with despite. I went swimming despite the fact that the weather was cold. These are not bad. I mean, actually, you can use them. It's just they're a little bit complicated right now. You don't have to use them. In spite of, despite, perfect. They will work just fine. And the order can be reversed. Despite the cold weather, comma, I went swimming. Same as the adverb clause rules. If you put the phrasal preposition first, have the comma. If you put it second, do not have the comma. Okay. Now, you are ready for the next part of your handout. On your handout, here are the sentences that you need to combine or adapt in some way. The spring weather was cold. Stop. My tomato plants grew well. This is a surprise relationship. Usually if the spring weather is too cold, the tomato plants will die. But this is a surprise outcome. So we need to have not because of or due to or anything like that. So combine this with an adverb clause, right? I was going to say the transition. Even though, most common one, although or though. The phrasal prepositions, we just talked about those. In spite of, despite. Transition, but or yet. Conjunction, or I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Transition is however. However, or on the other hand, conjunction is the but or the yet. Okay, so finish that. On the handout, if you're coming to class on Monday, or just submit all of this on Canvas if you're not coming in on Monday. Okay, we need to get to the next two parts. The next one is a direct contrast. So I'm just going to jump right into this for time. This is where you're not saying it's a surprise relationship. You're just saying that these are opposites in some ways. They directly contrast each other. Mary is rich, Jack is poor. That's the opposite. Now for the adverb clause, the only one we have is while. That's all we have for this. Mary is rich while Jack is poor. Now you can put the while on either side. While Mary is rich, Jack is poor, or Mary is rich while Jack is poor. It does not matter at all. But you'll always, there we go. You'll always have that comma. Whether this is second or first does not matter. Direct contrast while always has the comma. Okay, for transitions. Now again, transitions, you stop the first sentence and then start the other one. Mary is rich, comma, Jack is poor. And there's nothing so special about this one. We have two choices. However is the most common one. Mary is rich, stop. However, comma, Jack is poor. But on the other hand is another nice option. Mary is rich, stop. On the other hand, comma, Jack is poor. Jack, comma, on the other hand, comma, is poor. Okay, so that's the transitions we have for direct contrast. For the conjunctions, same as the regular contrast. Mary is rich, Jack is poor, but is okay, yet is okay. Mary is rich, comma, but Jack is poor. Mary is rich, comma, yet Jack is poor. Okay, that was a little bit rushed, but there's only 3 of them. So here's the contrasting sentences on the handout. July is hot in America. July is cold in Australia, because we're on different sides of the globe, different north of the equator and south of the equator. So adverb clause, even though, although, transition, however, on the other hand, and then the conjunction, but or yet. Last one, conditions. So as you might remember from chapter 17, the adverb clauses, most of these have the same one. I don't eat breakfast, I get hungry during class. If in this condition, I just said the answer. In this condition, this will happen. So that is the most common one, if. If I don't eat breakfast, comma, I get hungry during class. Unless is another one that is also quite common, and it just means if not. Unless you take your umbrella, you'll get wet. If you don't take your umbrella, unless you take your umbrella, you'll get wet. Those are the adverb clauses. We've had those before. For the transitions, I always eat breakfast, stop. Comma, I get hungry during class. This one, I'm just going to jump right to the answer. Otherwise is the answer for this one. That's the only transition we have for conditions. I always eat breakfast, stop. Otherwise, if I don't eat breakfast, otherwise, comma, I get hungry during the class. You'd better hurry. Otherwise, if you don't hurry, otherwise you will be late. That's the transitions. And of course, we can move those around a little bit, as we always can with the transitions. This is a form here you'll see sometimes. You notice that I always stop with a period and start a whole new sentence. That's the most common way to do it. That's generally the best way to do it. But it is possible to combine these with a semicolon, and then it's not a new sentence. So you don't have a capital here. You still have the commas, though. I'm not going to talk about this one anymore. It's not on my test. You don't have to use it, but you will see it. It's okay to use sometimes, but generally I just recommend. For the transitions, just separate the sentences. You'd better hurry, stop. Otherwise, you'll be late. That's the easiest way to use the transitions. I think it's generally the best way to use the transitions. And for the conjunctions, remember that's the fanboys. Like and, but, yet, so, that's the ones we've had. The other very common one that I hope comes to your mind, I always eat breakfast, comma, I get hungry during class. That would be the O of the fanboys. Or, I always eat breakfast, comma, or I get hungry during the class, right? If I don't eat breakfast, I get hungry. It's either I eat breakfast or I get hungry. It's one of the two. I always eat breakfast, comma, or I get hungry during class. You'd better hurry, comma, or you'll be late. And then the else often shows up with it. Doesn't have to, but they're very commonly together. Or else you'll be late. All right. There's another one. Take your umbrella or else you'll get wet. This is the final part of the handout and the final slide for this lecture. For the adverb clause, that's a little bit hard. I kind of give you a hint. Use if and don't. So you're going to change this sentence a lot to make it fit. If you don't leave now, right? The should has to go away with this. So if you don't leave now, comma, you'll be late for class. There's the answer. The transition, conjunction, you can keep this the same as it is. Just add the otherwise. And then for the conjunction, add the or, and then you'll be set. Okay, that's it. So some of you, maybe most of you, I'll see you on Monday. Otherwise, finish the handout, put it on Canvas, and follow the directions, and you'll see how to do that. All right, hope you've enjoyed your weekend.